Welcome to episode 54 of Marathon Talk, powered by Abbott World Marathon Majors. This week, we look back at a bonkers new women's marathon world record, as well as wrapping up all the other news from the Bank of America Chicago Marathon. We'll also take a look at what it all means for the series finale in New York coming up. And we hear from Chicago race director Carey Pinkowski on that run by Ruth Chepngetich and all the other news from an amazing Chicago. Right, let's go. Deena, you were there.
I mean, the whole weekend was bonkers. It started off really great with breakfast with the boss, the great Donna Stone, CEO of Abbott World Marathon Majors and Gold Club members. It was so fun to meet so many of the people in our master class who were running that the Chicago Marathon weekend, 3 of them there. And it was Jill and Ellen and David, whose dad flew in from India to visit, but I was on the women's lead vehicle for that race, and we'll get into the nitty gritty and all the details of that. But my mind was simply blown kilometer after kilometer at that race performance. It was quite a weekend.
Tell me, like, before we get into Chicago, of course, what a brilliant weekend of racing yet again. Well done, Carey Pinkowski and the team. I'm really looking forward to hearing his thoughts on the race. You know, at Breakfast with the Boss, because I've never been to one of these, right? Breakfast with the Boss, hear about it. What is for breakfast?
It's really whatever you want. I mean, I wolfed down a couple chocolate croissants, but everybody was sitting around at big round tables, and there was hot coffee and tea and fresh fruit and eggs and lots of carbs for the runners. And everybody goes around and introduces themselves. And Ted Metellus, the race director of the New York City Marathon, where we're heading out to next, Martin, was there. And Jack Fleming, the CEO and president of Boston Athletic Association that puts on the Boston Marathon, and Carey Pinkowski, the Chicago executive race director, was there. So all there. I mean, I love that the other race directors were there supporting Carey on his weekend. But the fact that Carey had time to show up with all he has to do and his responsibilities for the weekend. But Donna Stone was great in hosting everybody. Ron in our master class was there, and he showed off. He's recently diabetic. He showed off the Lingo, the Abbott device he was wearing to manage his diabetes. It was just such a great a great meeting. It seemed to fly by. I wish I would have had all day.
Sounds like something that, you know, how do you go? How do you get to go? I think if you're listening and you're not sure how you get to go, how do you get to go?
To get into the Gold Club, they limit it to 1,000 people. And I think it's like a 3,000 person waiting list to get kind of these privileges where I actually don't know, but I assume that it gives you privileges of getting into the races themselves. But I saying that, I don't even know. It seemed like a lot of people there needed Boston as their last star. And so Jack Fleming was there and was like, I'm out of here. You know, I can't have too many conversations here. He was put on the spot, not just by them, but by me rubbing it in that I beat him in the 5K earlier that morning at the Abbott Chicago 5K. So it was just a fun, it felt, you know what, it was a reminder that we're all in this sport together. And there's no other sport in the world that offers that you could have the CEOs, the race directors, the general runners all in the same room sharing breakfast together. It was pretty awesome.
Great. More, of course, coming up about the incredible race a little bit before that. How's your training, Deena?
So how have you been, Martin?
Well, yes.
Let's not talk. I did a good 5K. I'll tell you that. I broke 20 minutes and I was super happy about it. I just went for it. I was all out, to be honest.
Shall we leave it there then?
But as far as mileage, not so much.
So here's a question for you. Have you ever in your entire marathon career started a marathon as underprepared as this one?
Um, no, but I also love a challenge.
Yes.
But I bet my long run is longer than yours right now.
Well, that is possible. I was going all right, and as regular listeners to the show may know, I was actually going really well with my running, and I probably over egged it a little bit. I just just got a bit too big for my boots. I was like, that's a phrase, isn't it? I got too big for my boots, and I operated above my station. I tried to cash a check that simply was too big. And as a result, I went from a like feeling great over 14 miles to just having a sore enough hamstring. I'm up to 2 miles. So, I'm back at two. So 24 to go. I'm figuring that all the hard work is done. And all I'd be doing now is tapering and easing back anyway. So I'm just doing the easing back part of marathon training.
But I say this all the time, Martin. You are so good about continuing to get out in the
Yes.
limitations that you have. So I would love to hear what you've been doing to keep your
I'm
endurance, because
swimming, I'm
I
running.
admire that in you.
Yeah, I'm still swimming. I'm cycling. I've been out on my bike. So, those things are all good. I've absolute confidence in my cardiovascular capacity to run this. I'm really looking forward to it. Of course, we're both going out to New York City in a few weeks' time. I've never done it. Deena's done it a gazillion billion times. She's run it really quickly, and I've not. So, my longest run till this week's 14 miles I did a couple of weeks ago. So even that is kind of only halfway, right? Just over. So I think it'll be okay as long as the hammy holds together and doesn't decide to be naughty in the run. And if it does, we will just deal with it. What else have I been doing? That's probably about it. Enjoying, swimming out on the gravel bike. No last minute
The
panic
last
training. That's it.
Our, I'm glad you're not panic training. I thought about it on the plane
No.
ride back from Chicago. I'm like, should I get in a good long run beforehand? And I just decided that that's probably not the smartest thing to do. I don't want to sabotage myself more than I already have by my lack of preparation.
We're
But I
saving it,
also know
right? We're
that,
saving it.
yeah,
We are
yeah.
saving it for the big day.
Can you taper without training? Can you train? Can you?
Yeah.
Does that still count as a taper?
Is it called a peak? Peaking from what? Yeah,
Oh my.
I know, but it's going to be fun. Hopefully, we're going to produce some fun content as well. We're going to do some recording as we go, and yeah, I'm really, really, really looking forward to it. But this episode is not about New York City. It is all about the Bank of America Chicago Marathon, and what a race it was.
Well, if we're going to talk Chicago Marathon, we have to start with that stunning performance by Ruth Chepngetich. She broke the world record by 2 minutes, just about 2 minutes, running 2 hours, 9 minutes and 56 seconds. It's hard to believe that I'm talking about a woman when I say that number, because it reminds me of last year when Kelvin Kiptum broke the men's world record. I had to learn how to say the 2 hours, 35 seconds. I was like, do we say 2 hours, no minutes, 35 seconds, or do we just skip minutes? We just ignore the minutes. We just say 2 hours, 35 seconds. So to me, you have to like reteach how these words come out of your mouth. So she destroyed Tigis Desefa's Berlin marathon performance, which was a world record last year, 2:11:53. And I got to see it from the lead vehicle. Wow. And it was mind blowing from the very first steps.
Yeah. I mean, thinking back to, previous marathon performances that are standout phenomenal, this one stood out for many reasons. And one of them being, you said you were in the race car, but you were also kind of at technical meetings beforehand. And, Chepngetich was very clear that she was going to go for it, right? Of course, she's won the race twice before in the past. She's actually gone out pretty quick in the past as well. She won Chicago in 2021 and 2022. In 2022, she went through halfway in 65.44, but she did detonate a little bit then, and the same the previous time. But she didn't this time, and it was her intention from the get-go to go fast.
It was, but there was a little bit of controversy in the pre-race technical meeting where the athletes get their bib numbers and get last instructions for the next morning. When they put up on the big screen in the technical meeting the pacing charts, it had the official race pacers for the men and the women, and that they were going through 30K. But then they had a personal pace list, and it had all the personal pacers for Ruth Chepngetich, Satume Kebede, Joycelyn Jepkoskai, Dietu Asmara, Kira D'Amato, Sarah Hall, Diane Nakori on the American side. And it just showed who they were pacing. And so it got a little contentious in the technical meeting because the paces were not listed. And as the race began, it was very clear that everybody was on their own plan. Nobody was like looking out for each other and seeing what the other racers were doing. So it was a really interesting dynamic in the first like 15 kilometers of the race that everybody just went to different sides of the streets with their pacers. And it was strange to witness. But when you saw Ruth Chepngetich with her pacers coming through 5K in 15 flat.
Yeah.
Coming through 10K in 30:15, coming through the half marathon in 1 hour, 4 minutes and 16 seconds. I just kept holding my helmet on my head. Like, is this really possible? And she wasn't there alone. Satume Kebede of Ethiopia was like yo-yoing off of her a little bit. So I wasn't sure if the paces were dynamic in that way or if she was just trying to reattach herself. But at 15K, when Ruth Chepngetich saw that Satume Kebede was with her, she put in a little bit of surge with her pacers. Wow. She was communicating with her pacers the whole time. They were sharing words with each other and grinding time after time. We noted, Martin, before we started recording, that her 1:04:16 first half was the fastest half marathon ever on U.S. soil.
Yeah,
and then she went on to run another.
The fastest half marathon by any woman in the world this year. You know, yes. So like she was going at halfway. Now, of course, we said she's got a history, particularly in Chicago, of going at halfway. Was there talk of, okay, right, we're going to see what we saw in 2022. She's gone through super quickly, but she's bound to detonate. She's got a history, you know, and she's gone through 10K in a time which beat the winning time of Beatrice Chebet in the Paris Olympic Games, you know, for 10,000 meters on the track. So, you know, I think she ran personal bests for every single distance, 5K, 10K, half marathon, marathon in the race. So, you know, there's a lot of big firsts here. And so one of the things that you would suggest at halfway is she can't maintain this. Can she?
Yeah. I mean, she beat her personal best at this distance. She was world champion in the marathon. She was the former world record holder in the half marathon. So her aggressive running pays off sometimes, but in 2021 and 2022, everybody thought she was reckless. But she said in the pre-race press conference that her training was good, which is a very benign statement coming from a Kenyan. It seems like they all say that. It's like a safe thing to say. But she followed that up with something that she said that stuck with me the whole race. She said, "Tomorrow I am going to run a beautiful race." And I just kept thinking about that. Every time I saw a mind-blowing split, I'm like, well, she said she was going to run a beautiful race. And she does have the history of running aggressively and recklessly like this, but she does fade, but she's never really fallen apart in a race. So as the 5K kilometer splits went on, and I'm like, well, she's fading, but she's not fading that badly. Like, I think the world record's in jeopardy here. And then as we had a mile to go, I'm looking at my watch thinking like, well, she's going to obliterate the world record. And she did have a moment where she faded 35 to 40K. She was fading in her last 5K segment. She was starting to fade, and her pacer Barnabas Kiptum went back a few strides to her and said something. And as soon as he said it, she opened up her hands and just got this sprinter form. It reminded me of seeing the 100-meter dash, right? She's like, her arms just opened up and her stride opened up and she was grimacing and she was going to a place I had never seen come out of her before, where she was just grinding. And when we turned to that corner and saw the finish line, I knew that she not only was going to destroy the world record, but she might even run under 2:10. And she did just that. I was caught up in it. Yeah, totally mind blown by the experience, by what I was witnessing, completely mind blown, in awe, excited, emotional, seeing, knowing that Carey Pinkowski, like he did the year before, was gonna have another world record, greeting another world record holder at the finish line. It wasn't until I got back to the hotel and was in the lobby that I was seeing like some skepticism about her performance. And we talked about this too, Martin. You had a beautiful words that summed up kind of that feeling.
Yeah, well, look, I think to my original point, there's an expectation that she may fade despite having pedigree. You know, she's got pedigree as an athlete, but she's also got pedigree as an athlete that doesn't always run well in the second half. But not this time. She split 65-40 for the second half. And as you say, sometimes in a race, you know, when you get the pace right, it can all go wrong in the last couple of miles. Well, that didn't happen because she ran the last 2 miles in 4:45 and 4:49. She won the race by 7 minutes. She became the only woman to have won 3 Chicago marathon titles. You know, she ran like 4:56 mile pace for the last couple of miles. Her average mile pace for 2:09.56 was 4:57, making her the first woman ever to average under 5 minutes for the mile. The first woman ever to average under 5 minutes for a mile. I mean, absolutely outstanding performance. Almost unbelievable comes to mind, and hence why I think I use the term, you know, in these situations, breakthrough performances require, you know, a healthy curiosity. And healthy curiosity means that we're acknowledging a phenomenal importance, but we're also acknowledging many things that potentially may contribute to those phenomenal performances. And, you know, we've seen some incredible developments this year, Deena. Over the last, you know, year, you and I have said many times on this show that we are seeing a period, particularly in women's marathon running, like we have not seen before. You know, and there's been breakthroughs in tech, breakthroughs in footwear, breakthroughs in training, breakthroughs in women's marathon running, that now means the women's marathon is closer to the men's marathon world record than it has ever been before. I think it's important to have acknowledgement of amazing performances, but, you know, also healthy curiosity around what that means.
Right. And that's the word I love that you use, that healthy curiosity, because I feel like episode after episode, we're just in awe of what we're seeing. But, you know, if you take that curiosity, you could look at every factor and statistic that supports what your thinking is, whether you're skeptical or whether you're just in awe of this. And with Ruth Chepngetich, like, she's been on the scene, chipping away, lowering her personal best, and really an aggressive runner. And when that meets the shoe technology. And I'm not saying that her record is because of shoe technology, because I think at first when these super shoes came out, you saw immediate performances because of that carbon plate, an immediate increase in performance and faster times. But now maybe we're seeing the effects of that foam technology that is allowing runners to put in more miles, harder workouts, shorter recovery phases. So they're getting more work in without the effects on joints and muscle damage, because the foam technology is so supportive. And so we're seeing Ruth in multiple training blocks, able to stay healthy and really get in a lot of good work, building capillaries and heart strength and all the physiological benefits that come with putting work together on top of work, on top of work, on top of work. And she's putting it in, right? Because we see what she's capable of with previous world record in the half marathon and her wins already in Chicago and her aggressive racing style. And that meeting with more kilometers on top of kilometers, I think is what allowed this performance to happen.
Mm.
I think another thing to note here is who Ruth Chepngetich left in her dust. I think it was 7 minutes down the road was Sutume Kebede of Ethiopia. She had the fastest time in the world this year when she won Tokyo in the spring in 2:15:55. And she tried to go with Ruth Chepngetich. She tried to close that gap that Ruth had opened up, and she suffered greatly. It was a hard way to run a marathon, but Sutume Kebede was second in 2:17, which now just seems like putzing along. If you look at it in marathon terms, it was a world record over a decade ago, but now it's not seeming so fast. But kudos to Sutume Kebede for trying to make it an honest race and be up there.
Yeah. What about this for a fact, Deena? She'd have been 2 miles ahead of you.
Yeah. Yes.
No. Too early. Too early for that kind of comment.
It's not too soon at all. The world record is now almost 10 minutes faster than my personal best, which was an American record for 19 years.
Yeah, 2 miles ahead of you. She'd have been 2 miles ahead. Quite staggering. Anyway, shall we crack on talking about the men's race? It was a bit of a footnote because of what was going on in the incredible women's race, but John Corritt ran the race of his life to run 2:02:43. That's the second quickest time of the year this year, behind Benson Kipruto ran the fifth fastest of all time. As Kelvin Kipton, Mele Kipchoge, Cisse Lima, Benson Kipruto, and then John Courier, 12th in the all-time list. What a fantastic way, to win Chicago, running 2:02:43 in the men's race. We had the same two winners we saw in Berlin in the chair events in Chicago, but the men's race was much more of a dogfight, which is good because we get used to Marcel Hug winning everything.
Yeah, in the end, it wasn't until they turned onto East Roosevelt Road, that famous climb known as Mount Roosevelt. To the eye as you pass it by, it doesn't look that big of a climb, but at the strategically placed place that it is in the Chicago Marathon, after so many kilometers under your belt, it is quite a climb. That is where Marcel Hug made his move to shake off Daniel Romanchuk and Japan's Tomoki Suzuki to claim another victory on the streets of Chicago. It was an exciting race to witness. That last turn onto Columbus Drive belonged to Marcel Hug once again.
Brilliant. In the women's wheelchair event for Catherine De Bruyne, it was very much a solo mission from very early on. Susanna Scaroni was the only athlete still in touch with her, but unfortunately, she suffered a flat tyre to leave De Bruyne ahead solo to win by almost 3 minutes, breaking her own course record with a 1:36:12. Good day all round in Chicago. And in the fall marathon season, check me out. In the autumn marathon season, it's just New York City coming up in November. Deena and I will be there. We're really looking forward to it. What does all this mean for the end of that Abbott World Marathon Major Elite Series coming up in New York? We do know that Tamarit Tola and Helen Obiri are both running in New York. If they win, they take series titles. So they've both got to win to take the series titles. In the men's chair, Daniel Romanchuk can still mathematically catch Marcel Hug if he wins, but Hug has to score nothing. Unlikely. That would tie them up and see them go head-to-head scores anyway, which would tip it Marcel's way.
In the women's chair series, De Bruyne is not racing New York. So Manuela Schär sitting just 14 points back. If she can take first place, then she can win the series. So it really is fair game in New York. We'll have to stay tuned to the wheelchair performances coming out of New York City, but we'll be there to soak it all in. Everything TCS New York City Marathon coming up. Today's guest is the executive race director of the Bank of America Chicago Marathon. Hot off the press, celebrating another world record at his event last weekend. Carey, congratulations and welcome to Marathon Talk.
Well, Deena, thank you for having me on, and thank you for spending the weekend with us and making the call from NBC from the lead women's vehicle. So appreciate your partnership for sure.
I feel like we're all still buzzing from that performance and four great performances, wheelchair racers, John Career winning the men's side and Ruth Chepngetich taking almost 2 minutes off the former world record. Tell us your feelings as she passed 5K at 15 minutes, 2:06 projected finish time, to the last 5K of the race when it seemed like the record was in sight and she looked strong. And then we'll ask you about that finish line moment, which is always a cherished one. What were your emotions during the race itself?
Well, obviously, I think we still are feeling the presence of Kelvin Kiptum. I think if any of the athletes, our pro athletes, were not aware of that, that would be, it was, he obviously what he did in 2023, I think resonated this year. I think it had a profound effect on Ruth. And, like everyone, we did the moment of silence before the start of the race. And it was, we had 52,000 people lined up there. And to have that, you could hear a pin drop,
right,
which was amazing. It was almost like everything everything stopped for a moment. And, I'm sure he was looking down and enjoyed that, what Ruth did for sure, and the way that everybody ran. And it was perfect weather. The combination of that and, just everything was set really well. The week went really well. The preparation for the staging of the event, all of that. And it's an amazing ecosystem that comes together, in Chicago, getting the route set. I mean, it's 26.2 miles of urban roadway, so that's a lot of ground for our streets and sand team and Department of Transportation to go out and make sure everything's seamed up and everything that's in place for not only our runners, but also our Paralympic athletes. So, for them to get everything put in place, obviously Ruth took advantage of it.
Yeah, you really had your finger on the pulse of the entire week leading up with the different people you were meeting with, from the VIP opening reception when you were thanking sponsors and past champions, to being at breakfast with the boss, that Abbott World Marathon Majors breakfast with you. And you touchingly addressed the people in Florida who had to defer. A couple of them were in the room, had made the trip, but You have your finger on the pulse of every emotion, kind tributes, sentiments behind Kelvin Kiptum's world record last year before we lost him earlier this year. So he was on your mind as Ruth was racing. Such a reckless, like you even said in the press conference, like, people have always come here to run fast. This is a fast course, so we shouldn't be
Sure.
surprised in the first half of the race that people are gunning for it, right? Looking for their
Yeah.
PRs. There was a lot of them that day. But I even alluded to it in my coverage with NBC, that people come to Chicago to run flat. It is notoriously flat and fast. But I also alluded that it was the Kelvin Kiptum effect.
Sure.
He ran a beautiful race last year, and the best in the world wanted to come to Chicago to run fast. Like, it was an extra special year, because if it wasn't Ruth Chepngetich, it would have been Sutume Kebede. It would have been Joycelyn Jepkosgei. There was a lot of people on that list on men's and women's side that could have run records that day. But I
And
don't necessarily think Chicago's fast. 40 turns, a huge hill strategically placed right before the finish. What do you think makes it so fast?
I think it's the history and the legacy of this event. I mean, we celebrated Steve Jones's 40th anniversary of his world record from 1984. It has been a place that historic performances have taken place, and I think I even mentioned this in our press conference on Friday. I said, you guys don't be wringing your hands or going out too fast. I mean, they've been going out too fast since Steve Jones and Joan Samuelson and Ingrid Christensen raced each other. I mean, I went back and looked at some of the broadcasts from the early days, and they were talking about Joan and Ingrid are too fast. They're in front of the men. And Joan went on and ran 2:21, which if you look at considering that performance, I mean, that's still amazing that it was done in 1985. And then obviously we had Paula and Catherine Dareba and Tiranish Dababa and yourself and Konstantina Dita, who you and her, I mean, she was notorious for doing that. I mean, that's what they do here. That's what athletes do here. So keeping in that tradition, Ruth Chepngetich did what everybody thought was the wrong thing to do. And she had been here 2 times before. In both of her times that she won, she was on world record pace. I mean, I was just looking at her splits from 2023. I mean, she set the world record at 25K and 30K in 2023. So, I mean, and then through 35K, she was still on world record pace. So she knew what that felt like. I think that she had she was very familiar with the course. So she knew when that came, when that everything starts to get really heavy, she knew what to expect and where she was and what she needed to do. So she just put it together.
Right.
I mean, she was there. She had put herself in the position to do something historic 2 other times and just came up short. And obviously was not that fit last year when she ran against Safan Hassan, but still ran with her. So she knew where she was and what it felt like and what she needed to do. And
right. It's only reckless when it doesn't work out, but
it doesn't work.
yeah.
But in order
she
to
was
do
14
something like
seconds
that,
off the world record in 2022. So she was close.
she was close. She's flirted with it. I mean, obviously the record dropped from Chicago to Berlin 2:14 to 2:11. And I think they take that all in stride. I mean, that's, I know these women, I know how they train. I know who they are. I mean, I think to a certain extent, the Kenyan women have an advantage because they see these other women training and they're not, it's not like they meet for the first time. They're keenly aware of what they do. So, but she's, she's an amazingly talented athlete. She's just Ruth is in the same mold as Kelvin or our previous champion. She's just a very sweet person, but I could tell that she was ready to go. She was very relaxed, smiling, very, very, very outgoing. And the times I talked with her beforehand. So,
yeah. And do you remember her words at the press conference? And it gave me chills when I wrote it in all capitals on my notes. She said, "My training has gone well. And on Sunday, I am going to run a beautiful race." Indeed, she did.
sure.
So you've had 7 world records at your event, and I wrote them down. Khalid Kanuchi and Steve Jones, Kelvin Kiptum on the men's side, Paula Radcliffe, Catherine Deriba, Bridget Kosgei, and now Ruth Chepngetich. So 3 men and 4 women. What stands out as like someone like you and Tracy Wilson, you go and you seek the best athletes in the world. What stands out when you see their greatness come to fruition at an event that you tirelessly spend the entire year putting together?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, it's, they're all of these athletes, all of the world record holders. We've also had Eliud Kipchoge here and Kenesse Bekele and Paul Turgot and some of the greatest athletes in the world. I mean, an interesting fact sometimes is Paul Turgot has never won here, you know.
That's crazy.
Kenesse Bekele's never won here. So, I mean, the athletes that have come here and not won is equally as impressive. But, I mean, you also have to put Rosa Moda in there, too. I mean, she's won a couple times in Chicago. So it's just, I think you rely on the tradition. I mean, athletes that have great core strength. I mean, all of those athletes you talk about had great track credentials. I think that's a part of it, but I think they tap into the history and the legacy of the event. I think it's something that I think Kelvin was keenly aware of that. I mean, obviously Ruth is very, very, very aware of it. There's so many athletes that have come before them that have been successful here. Part of it, I think the fact that we continue to realize that these athletes, these talented, are coming here to run a marathon. They're not coming here to do a press conference or coming here to do appearances or whatever. I mean, it's an athletic competition, and that's first and foremost. So we try to get everything that we need to do as far as video or capture that beforehand when they get here. Obviously, we have the introduction on Friday, but we give them basically 2 days to kind of get into that mindset. I mean, there's no press appearances. We don't do anything. The race is built very on convenience, where it's a really short commute. I mean, we could walk to the start. I mean, obviously we put them in buses for security reasons, but it's a 4-minute bus ride, and they can train. The training is right out the front door. They run past the start-finish line during their training. It's so accessible to friends and family members or coaches or friends. Significant others can get to the route on foot or jump on public transportation. I think all of those things are part of it. And, we recognize the routine that they need to stay in, and we don't interrupt that, so that's a big part of it. And I think people appreciate that. There's no media the day before. We really limit everything we do on race day because they need to recover and we do a few things with the champions, but it's first and foremost about competition.
Right. And you've done a really great job at bringing past champions in to do that kind of networking and events.
We have you running around.
Well, yeah, but I think it's great because then you get world records out of it for the athletes that you bring in to actually perform. So it's just a brilliant model.
We have athletes like yourself or Joan or Steve or Greg Meyer that do all of the stuff that we need to do.
We would never.
They're obviously not running. They have other things to do. Like Steve said, he had 2 breakfasts and a lunch on Sunday. So,
we eat our way through Chicago.
All in the line of work, all in his job responsibility. So
it's fantastic. It was really fun to be on that lead vehicle and witness Ruth winning for the 3rd time, but demolishing the world record by almost 2 minutes. The last time that you had both women and men's world records was in 2001 when Khalid Kanuchi was still representing Morocco and Catherine Deriba broke the world record. That was 23 years ago that you had both records. So how does it feel similar, like boastful to be like, yeah, we're the place? And how does it feel different?
Oh, wow. I mean, Khalid and Catherine, marvelous athletes. I mean, obviously their performance, you could argue that Catherine Deriba maybe one of the greatest of all time, if not the greatest. I mean, that you have to put her on that list. It's a short list.
And I think we said that their races were reckless and too fast
Right.
at the beginning. They're running
You
too
can use the
fast.
same script, right? The same
Yes.
dialogue. No, I mean, it's those athletes that, Khalid had that same kind of, they come in and I almost say they prepare, but they don't let anything clutter them. Oh, you can't do this and you can't do that. That's not part of their culture. They look at how fast, how fast they can go, and taking advantage of it. So, I mean, I'm just happy for the athletes. I mean, I'm happy for Ruth. I mean, you could argue she should have been on the Olympic team. I'm happy. I was happy for Kelvin, and all of the previous record holders. I mean, to be the fastest. I mean, you can put Emily Sisson in there. She's the fastest American. I mean, I'm just happy for him, because it's a lot of work that goes into this, and everything has to go right. I mean, I'm not going to say luck, but you have to be lucky, because they travel, they come to a different hotel room. There's all of these things.
Eating different foods.
The flight can be delayed. There's whatever. They're delayed for a few hours here. They miss a flight there. All of that. I mean, all those things have to align. I think that's, to a certain extent, I think that's why Ruth she feels comfortable. She's familiar with the hotel. She's familiar with where to go and how to do things. So I think all of those things factor into it. But I'm just happy. I'm happy for the athletes, and Ruth is part of our family. She will continue to be part of our family, and John Career will be part of our family now as a champion. So as I said to him on Sunday, I said, John, you are now part of our family. You're a champion of the Bank of America Chicago Marathon, so you'll be welcomed here for as long as you want to come. As you are part of our family, and Joan is Steve, and all of the athletes from the different generations.
Right. And I was just going to ask about John, because we talk about those other great performances. Emily Sisson 2 years ago, breaking the American record, lowering that American record. You look at Safan Hassan last year. She was in the shadow of Kelvin Kiptum's world record, but she ran a course record 2:13 that 2 months prior would have been the world record. So you might have had two world records in one race if Berlin hadn't and if happened for Tigist Assefa. And then you have John Career, who ran such a tactically brilliant race to break them when the rest were just starting to suffer. It was like he smelled blood in the water and just took off. I was talking to him and Coach Ron Mann afterward. He ran he's the fifth fastest marathoner in history with that performance.
Right.
So these are the kind of things that maybe not at the headline, maybe they're page 2 of the Chicago Tribune, because
it was the second fastest time ever run behind Kelvin Kiptum in Chicago. I mean, and ahead of the Paul Turguts and the Eliud Kipchoge's and all. There's so many athletes that have competed here. It was an amazing performance in itself, and he had a lot left.
Right.
He looked absolutely in control. One of the more impressive run for homes that we've seen, and the splits, the way that he closed. I mean, that was Kelvin-esque in many ways. So I think there's more to come from John. Also, he's young. I think he's done it the right way. He's come along gradually. He's had the same coach who they have a very patient approach to things. There's some exciting things to come from John Career also.
Right. Like, this is the beginning of his career. He won the Los Angeles Marathon a couple of times, but really defined and solidified his name in the history of our sport with his performance in Chicago this past weekend. Unbelievable. I'm going to talk about that finish line feel, because I was so upset that I didn't get to see you at the finish line welcoming Ruth, because that was a highlight of mine last year, seeing you outstretched arms waiting for Kelvin Kiptum to come in. But I think by the time I got to the finish line on the lead moto, I said to you, now you're just getting greedy. Like, you have 2 world records.
Yeah.
I think you're just getting greedy.
I was kind of told, not told, but I was, they said, hey, you come on. Right? But I mean, not that for the first world record in a while. I mean, obviously Khalid was the last man, and then Kelvin to do it, and then I was inside. I was equally as but I was told that I got in the way of some photographers and stuff like that. So I stayed back a little, but I was still able to greet Ruth at the finish line. But I was a little bit more subdued on the outside. On the inside, I was still going crazy
Yeah,
because
that heart pounding. Can you
yeah, it was
speak
fantastic.
a little bit about what it is like to share these moments with your family? Your daughter Sarah, your wife
Oh yeah,
Sue.
my wife who was she was working on a race office, and my daughter was helping out with some media stuff. So they both came, and my wife looked at me. She said, "Are you kidding me? 2 years in a row, you know?" And they get very emotional because they know they get to know these athletes also, and they've gotten to know the athletes over the years. So you know, it's emotional because I think they've seen, you know, the disappointment where we've had athletes that have been injured. I mean, obviously the heartbreak of losing Kelvin, and then obviously Semi Wanjuru was another tragic loss, and very, 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 very early in his career as Kelvin was. So you know they become part of your family, and you get to know them, and
Right.
they you get to know their personalities and their smile. I think that's the beauty of our industry is that our athletes, as dedicated as they are and as hard as they commit and they're to these efforts, you know, they're still very, 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 very personable. They're human beings, and I think for our sport, you get to meet them. You know, you get to meet them on one, and they're very accessible, and they you know they like to talk to people and they like to meet people, and it's I think that's what's different. I mean, some of the greatest athletes in the world, but they also are willing to stand in the lobby of a hotel and sign autographs for an hour, or talk to people on the street, or you know cheer for people when they come through the finish line or what. So I mean that's the most genuine part about it. So but for me, you know, it's I've been doing this for a long time, and I think I was kind of almost like, you know, thinking that that was the end of the records. We'd had so many, and five, maybe that was it. Maybe things have moved on from, and then Kelvin came back, and then so now I'm all about records again. So it's
Yeah,
like,
kind of, but
yes, you can go fast here, and then you know it's like maybe Emily Sisson will try to get Emily Sisson back, and maybe she goes and tries to push her American record down or whatever. So
yeah, I just feel like it's so beautiful to see Sarah and Sue and you at the finish line and the emotion on all your faces, because they see you putting in tireless work throughout the entire year and under circumstances that are not really under your control. You've had some hard years. And so
mhm.
for them to see these rewards, I feel like is just makes it extra special, right? Because you're riding the ebbs and flows of the sport without, as much as you try to have your finger on the pulse of everything and leave no stone unturned, you can't control what 52,000 people are experiencing in their training building up to it and their race day experience altogether. So speaking of 52,000 finishers, can you talk about that? How do you create this experience, this transformative experience for so many people?
Well, you know, we certainly don't do it alone. The ecosystem here is amazing. Chicago is the greatest event city in the world. If you think about what goes on here simultaneously, we'll have the Cubs and the Sox playing. We may have a Bears game and a concert. We had concerts going on at the same time. The city does some street festivals. Obviously, the Bears were in London, but the city of Chicago is very, very, very good at producing events. And what the city does and what the other event producers, along with the city agencies and our federal agencies, is we share a lot of best practices. So whether it's Lollapalooza or the White Sox or the Cubs or the Bears, we get together at the beginning of the year, and obviously the federal government also briefs us on what to expect and what to look forward to. But it's that sharing of best practices in the city of Chicago. I think that makes us all better collectively. And the Chicago Police Department it's an amazing group to work with. I mean, they have a dedicated group of the leadership is amazing. Our superintendent is amazing, And they would just work really hard at making this happen. And, somebody knows somebody that's running in the marathon. So, and for me, over the years, this was my 34th year. 34 years ago, there may be police officers that I worked with are patrolmen, which are now commanders and captains and senior leadership. So they've gone through, I think we've all grown together. I think the city's grown together. The event has grown together, the departments. We try to improve on the way we do things. So that's probably the most rewarding for me, is how dedicated the teams are in the park districts. I mean, we have a great venue in which to stage the event. I mean, it's a great tour of the city for all of our participants, but it's also accessible for friends and family members. Working with the CTA, you can get on our elevated train and get to different locations. They add additional staff that you can get by a day pass. So I think there's a lot of things that contribute to it. Joan talks about the convenience of it. The majority of our participants can walk to the start from their hotels, walk from the finish to their back to their hotels. The local businesses do a great job in welcoming people to Chicago. They do all kinds of specials and recognition. And then we've got some really great sponsors that look at it the same way we do. It's about the race experience, how our participants, and could we take more people? We certainly can, but the demand is there. We turn a lot of people away, but what we've been able to do the last couple of years is really look at how we're doing things and grow gradually. And that's talking to our participants, talking to our city agencies, our volunteers, our sponsors, and making sure we don't lose sight of the race day experience. That comes first and foremost. I mean, there's the pressure of all these people that want to run that didn't get in, but we make sure we balance that and not to compromise. We're not caught up in being the biggest in the world. I mean, we certainly could do that, but we want to make sure that as we grow gradually, and we're doing the right things and analyzing how we do it. So Mike Nishi and Greg Hipp and Antonio Owens from our operations team, they take a really good look at how people migrate to the start. We look at different overhead photography from different points on the course, and how do we stage people and how do we release them and how do they go through the finish line. I mean, we have the format and the footprint to do some amazing things, but we want to make sure that we do it right and we're aware of how we do it.
Right. I think I said at the VIP welcome reception that Chicago is the greatest sporting city in the world. And this weekend, Bank of America Chicago Marathon weekend, is the greatest event in that city. So it's so exciting that it was rewarding this year with the performances you got and the amount of finishers. But I think what I'm getting at is that there's this allure to like have a Boston qualifier, but your event is open to that transformative experience for so many people, first time marathoners. And I just think of it as such a beautiful thing. And speaking of Boston, I guess I've had the privilege of being with you a few times at the Shamrock Shuffle and the marathon with your good friend, Jack Fleming, the president and CEO of the BAA and
Yes.
Boston Marathon. He's by your side. Can you talk about the importance of those friendships, the relationships within the leadership of the Abbott World Marathon Majors? Because I just think it was beautiful to witness.
Oh, sure. I mean, Jack is a good friend of mine. Ted Metellus is a good friend of mine. We share information constantly. We're individually very competitive, and we want to try to do things. But what we do in that competitive environment is it improves our participants' experience. So years ago we realized we were better collectively than we were individually, because a lot of the things that you could see from shared best practices and all of those things, and allowing access, like Jack was at our event with his team, looking at how, and it may be emergency medical, it might be how we do transports, how do we situational awareness, how are we aware of what's going on the course or what's those developments, and how do we process that from our unified command. So sharing that information not only with the Abbott World Marathon major races from North America, but with our partners in Europe and Tokyo. That's part of it. Also, a lot of other race directors with our race management program that have access to how we do things. So, I mean, Mike's philosophy has been to give back. I mean, there was race directors that when Mike Nishi and I were starting out that were very generous to us. the Guy Morrises. I go back to Fred Lebow, all of those guys that really, and Alan Steinfeld, that were really mentors to us. We feel it's important that we share what we've learned with other races, because if collectively races in Indiana, here in the Midwest, Indianapolis or Davenport or around, in Wisconsin or Iowa or Missouri or anything, anywhere they come to our race management program, if they can learn something and get better, improve what they do, it's good for all of us. It means there's more people running and more people aspiring and getting going. I think that's the overarching goal. So we're very supportive, very competitive, but very supportive of what we do.
Right.
Sure.
It makes for a much better experience for all runners. And then they stay in the sport because the experience is so great and continue to travel to races. And believe me, I know Jack is competitive because we were duking it out at the Abbott Chicago 5K on Saturday. So I know
Yes,
he's competitive.
I heard all about it.
And
I heard all about it.
So
yeah.
the final question I have is, runners, we always look at ways to get better, faster, more efficient. And so how do you top this? Have you gotten to a place of even decompressing, or are you still just in the ultimate glow of the moment of how you get better as an event?
I mean, there's still a lot going on. I mean, obviously all of the facilities that you saw in the park, that all has to be taken down. I mean, obviously there's a loadout from the expo and all that. So we have a lot of people, our staff, see here in the office, a lot of our staff is here finishing up. So it won't be till probably early next week, that we kind of have the ability to put one foot up on the desk, not both feet, but maybe one foot, and go from there. So, but what we will do is we will get together very early while things are fresh in your mind, and collectively do a debrief and take that data while it's still new. And then, a lot of our participants that we reach out to, while things are still fresh in their mind, because as time drifts on, they're like, oh, there's something I want to, it wasn't that. The heck with it, I'm not going to mention that. So you want to really get that data back when it's refreshing. But for us, our charity program is going to hit new milestones this year. We had a record number of finishers. We had a record number of, sounds like we're going to hear about that back from the city, record number of, the crowds were amazing on course. So it looks like they were, I mean, you saw that.
They were deafening. They were deafening. I could barely hear the studio. They were so loud, the crowds.
And I have to remind people, it was 2020, we canceled the event due to COVID. And in 2021, we were still mitigating that, even into 2022. So we're just now getting to the point where we're back to full speed. We had a great turnout from our volunteers. I think what Bank of America did with in the branding in their retail locations, and talking about the charities and identifying charity runners that were raising money for these wonderful organizations. I mean, that brought it front and center. I think what Kelvin did last year, I think that contributed to the visibility of the event. I mean, the city embraces the marathon in an amazing way, and it brings the city together in an amazing way. And, like I said before, we can't do it by ourselves. I mean, for me, as directors, there's sometimes where you just get out. The best thing you can do as the director is get out of the way. We have an amazing staff that are young and dedicated and smart and committed, and that just shows up in the work that's done. So, a lot of times I'm just like, okay, let me get out of the way. You guys, let you guys run this part of it, or run this idea. I mean, I stay in touch with everybody, but the way our expo has evolved and all those things. So, well, surrounded by a lot of very, very good people.
Indeed, you are.
And then our sponsors are also very much intrinsically connected to it too. Not just the funding, but their insight on what they think and how they embrace the event, how they activate the event.
They're invested not just financially, but emotionally and actually. Yeah, that is beautiful to see.
The cheer zones on the course, how they support the chair. It's an amazing team effort. And I'm just so honored to be part of it. I am honored and privileged to be part of this. And it's still a lot of fun. I still get up in the morning and, I want to go to work and I want to work on something or have an idea or whatever. It's great. I mean, and for me to be my job and my vocation to be something I did as a boy running around a park in Hammond, Indiana, so many, many years ago. You get to meet so many people of all walks of life and sizes and abilities over the years, and then the athletes, the elite athletes. So it's
Okay.
fantastic.
We can't let an interview go by without mentioning Villanova Wildcats. Go Wildcats.
Is Carey Tollefson here?
She's not, but she would be mad if I didn't mention that. Well,
Oh, yeah.
there's a time to look forward,
She
but
was
right
at
now,
Villanova a long time after I was there.
okay. Well, we don't have to mention that part. It's you guys are still Wildcats at heart.
We're still Wildcats, right?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Villanova.
Well, you are still breaking down, getting things into that warehouse and basking in the glory of a phenomenal Bank of America Chicago Marathon. The executive race director, Carey Pinkowski, thank you so much.
Deena, thank you so much for all that you've done for our event, but what you've done for women's athletics and women's running.
You're too generous. Thank you, my friend.
Right, that's it for this week's show. What a privilege to hear from Carey Pinkowski. Deena, what are you up to next couple of weeks? Tapering. You're tapering, aren't you?
Yeah. I'm tapering off of my non-training. We're going to have to figure out a new term to call that when you taper without the training necessary. But I really, all the kidding aside, Martin, I am really excited to be in New York City with you and to experience the Big Apple with the rest of the thousands of people coming from around the world. So I'm really looking forward to that. The first thing I'm going to pack are my Asics shoes that got me in a sub 25K. They worked some magic for me. So I'm going to wear them because they were also the shoe that John Corrier ran in to win the Bank of America Marathon. So you better believe I was thinking I was going to pack some beefier, meatier shoes, more
some
training
really
style
heavy ones.
shoes. I think I'm going with carbon plates.
Do you know what? For one crazy moment there, I thought you were going to say this. And I'm going to bring my shoes that I won my Olympic medal in. And I was going to be like, oh, no. Oh, no, please. Pressure's on.
No, I'm gonna leave the good mojo in them and keep them at home.
Well, I am really looking forward to it. Of course, we've got 3 weeks or so left. And normally in this phase of a marathon build-up, you would be doing less. I came to a bit of a juddering halt in my build-up, so I'm hoping to be able to hold myself together for the next 3 weeks. You know, it's funny when you're in, I've been training pretty well all year, and when you have a big target and you have the opportunity to run something, and many listeners to the show will understand, they've been putting some hard yards in for months and months and months, and just sometimes something comes along that switches your focus, changes your plans, and that's happened here. I had wanted to go to New York, not to run really fast, not to run really hard. The goal was always to enjoy the streets of New York and for to be able to do that. And of course, now I've come along and I've got this little niggle. I'm hoping that the next couple of weeks it will die down enough that I can cover 26.2 miles. I haven't actually. I'm going to have to whisper this because Deena doesn't know. I haven't had a conversation with Deena about what we'll do if things go wrong in the race. So I bet she's never been. Let's imagine Deena's not here just for a moment. I bet she's never been in a situation where somebody's had to say to her, "It's all right, Deena, you go on. You go on, Deena. I'll just deal with this in my own little hurt locker for the next couple of hours. You push on."
Listen, Martin, there is pizza we're going to be passing. There are going to be a lot of yellow taxi cabs that are famous in New York City. We've got plenty of options to lure us out of that 26.2 miles. But you know what? That finish line is like no other feeling. So I always have an exit strategy, but I hope to never use it. And we're just gonna have to be there to encourage each other along every step of the way, and that's what the journey is all about, isn't it?
Be patient, and we'll be fine.
Yeah.
All right. Looking forward to it.
Yes. Martin and I are New York City bound, and wherever in the world you are tuning in to listen to this, enjoy the run wherever it takes you.